time, and I call the member for Wills.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Every so often in this place there come moments that we have an ability to define what Australia is all about, or the future of Australia, really, for better or worse. And we sit here, I think, quite uniquely privileged to help shape the future of our nation. I think that's why we're all here. I can't think of a more pressing issues for Australians than cost of living and housing. Everywhere I go in my electorate of Wills, people share their experiences of housing becoming out of reach, more and more out of reach, and that's been for a number of years. So this is an issue for everyone, including younger Australians who feel completely locked out of the housing market. And I agree with them. The coalition government too, for 10 years, sat on those Treasury benches over there and allowed the issue of housing to effectively fester, ignoring the pleas for help and assistance from younger generations of Australians. Today, as a member of the Albanese Labor government, we're actually answering the call to action, and we're taking action. Fundamentally, housing, Speaker, is the foundational aspect of building a better life. It's the base from which people can realise their full potential. And it is an issue close to my heart, and I think many people here would share that as well. My own story is one that is probably emblematic of the Australian, the old Australian dream of home ownership. I'm the son of migrant parents. I remember growing up in a housing commission flat. Admittedly, it was a little rough, but I also remember the sense of gratitude that I had that it was, and really because of successive state and federal Labor governments and their policies, particularly the Hawke Labor government at the time, that gave us, my family, the safety, the security and the belonging, the sense of belonging through which we were able to access public housing and good education. These policies made a huge difference. And those housing policies gave me and my family a place to call home. So yes, I'm a houser and proud of that, son of migrant parents, proud of that. And their hard work, through their hard work, they were able to save up enough and move out of the Housing Commission and buy their own home. Now, in the early 80s, when they did that, the average house price was around 3.3 times an Australian's annual income. Today, the average house price is about 10 times or more the average income. So there's a huge shift, a huge disparity there. Having been a beneficiary of governments getting housing policy right, that kind of upbringing informs my perspective on housing policy today. And the view is quite simple. The starting point for me as a first principle is that housing is a human right. I think, like many, want home ownership not to be a distant dream but a reality for Australians. And in many ways, in my electorate of Wills, that is indicative of the aspiration that many Australians have. We know that many rent, we know that many have mortgages, they're under pressure, but of course everyone in the community wants to realise their full potential as well. People in my community of Wills regularly contact me and outline the immense housing stresses they faced. And while in our office we do our best, obviously, to help and support people, whether they need assistance with the Housing Authority or the Housing Commission to get better accommodation, or whether they need emergency accommodation. We do that work, and I know many MPs do the same type of work. The reality, though, is this. Focusing on reform and long-term solutions is, however, really the only way you're going to make big changes and help Australia move forward on this issue. And long-term focus and structural reform will deliver that lasting benefit to millions of people who need it most, just as it did some 45, 50 years ago when I first started out. And if you look back that far in history, Speaker, in the 40s, from the 1940s to the 1970s, that was really the kind of era of the Australian dream, the so-called Australian dream of home ownership. Back in the 80s and 90s, house prices were still very much lower than they are today, as I said. Buyers would borrow less, they'd save smaller deposits and spend less of their overall income on housing. Today, owning a home outright has dropped by 10%, and rental stress is worsening. And for young people, home ownership is harder than ever before. So rental stress is a significant issue, and particularly for young Australians, single-parent families, low-wage workers and older Australians on fixed incomes. Many young people are facing rent increase after rent increase, making it unaffordable to make ends meet, let alone save for a house deposit. So this also includes essential workers, nurses, aged care workers, early educators, police, AMBOs and those in hospitality who are priced out effectively the rental market, particularly in inner city areas as well. And some workers who spend half to two-thirds of their income on rent. So they tend to then have to commute for long distances to go to the hospitals or the stations or the places of work from their homes. These are the same essential workers who helped us get through the pandemic with such bravery and such dedication. Around 1 million renters across the country live in homes that are unsafe for their health as well, and this is an important issue in this debate, but they're afraid to speak up and request repairs in case they get evicted. And as many know in this place, single women over 55 are particularly vulnerable to homelessness. These are often women who are more likely to take on family or carer responsibilities, worked in casual or part-time roles and have less or no super to fall back on. It is unacceptable that in a country endowed with wealth and opportunity that many of our fellow Australians have nowhere to call home. But we cannot, of course, continue to let this happen. We can't simply accept this reality that 70% of young people believe they will never own their own home, which tends to be the polling that suggests that lack of belief. We cannot forfeit responsibility to future generations who are demanding that we act. Now, this is a place where we do debate, and we debate politics, and of course the previous government, we can't let them have a free pass on the failures over 9 years, which oversaw an increase in housing construction costs of some 46% over the last decade. And the former Prime Minister Morrison infamously said he didn't believe in a legacy. Well, he left a legacy of higher house prices, higher rents and greater housing stress, a legacy that has left many Australians unable to buy their own home. Equally, we have the Greens political party here have been pushing for policies that don't and actually can't work. They've been preaching about a rent freeze. I've heard this with the previous speaker. Well, I've got some news for the previous speaker. It doesn't actually work. The data from international jurisdictions shows that for properties under rent controls, there was increases in price, and for properties not under rent controls, there was ghettoisation and deterioration of properties. This is just hard data and evidence that exists. So basically, you've got the Greens Party and the Coalition who are free to play their politics in this place and to grandstand, and incomprehensibly when it comes to this bill, they're voting with the Coalition against the Help to Buy scheme, voting against the Help to Buy scheme for political gain and political grandstanding. It's remarkable. In contrast, the government, the Albanese Labor government, focuses on the substance on these policies. Making a genuine difference to people's lives is what we're doing this for. So, Speaker, what is the substance of the bill that the Greens political party and the Coalition parties are voting against? We just heard it from the previous speaker that they're not going to support it. That's out of their own mouth. Well, this bill is a bill that presents an actual unmistakable opportunity to reverse the decade of decline in serious housing policy, an opportunity this House and the Senate should take, must take. The Help to Buy scheme fulfils Labor's election commitment to support up to 40,000 Australian families and households to purchase a home of their own. This will mean the government will support eligible home buyers with an equity of up to 40% for new homes and 30% for existing homes. And this policy will not only provide a foot in the door for Australians with smaller savings, but it will also provide long-term relief for Australians who are part of the scheme. Our broad housing agenda, Deputy Speaker, as the Minister had correctly outlined, is directly addressing the issue of supply, and it's all about supply, 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 supply. The government has already helped more than 80,000 Australians into home ownership, and thanks to this legislation, many more Australians will have an opportunity to afford their own home. Over the next 5 years, we will build 1.2 million new homes to increase supply. Importantly, this policy also has a cost of living assistance built into it. As a result of the equity stake the government will have in this scheme, first home buyers will be able to have a smaller deposit, a minimum of 2%, and will have lower ongoing repayments while they participate in the scheme. And in addition, the Help to Buy legislation will help eligible new homeowners save hundreds of dollars per month on their mortgages. This is an example of long-term relief to a problem that is decades old. It's real. It will matter to these people. These are real people. It will make a difference to their lives, a real difference to their lives every single day. And on top of the many initiatives our Housing Minister has already been spearheading, such as and this is, by the way, on top of that, we've heard from previous speakers that suddenly apparently this is supposed to be a silver bullet. Well, probably say there's a lot more ammo in the chamber, Deputy Speaker. There are a lot of policies that we have actually announced and started to implement over the last year and a half, such as bolstering renters' rights and providing financial support to those doing it tough. We've increased the Commonwealth rental assistance by the largest amount in 30 years, 15%, to provide cost of living assistance to renters experiencing financial stress. And in addition, our government has been working extremely hard with states and territories on a renters' rights charter. This includes nationally consistent policies for genuine grounds for eviction, allowing security changes without the landlord's permission, making rental applications easier and protecting personal information, and much, much more. Action on renters' rights is a priority for the government, and we don't hide our ambition to ensure in this country home ownership is within reach for any Aussie who aspires to it. When I was reflecting on my remarks prior to this debate, I thought of many of my constituents that I've spoken to about this issue. I thought particularly of one woman, her name is Mary, who spoke to me at a community event. She talked of the stresses that are synonymous with temporary accommodation, knowing that she was at risk of homelessness. I thought of Ismail and Azali, who told me that recently, even with both of them working, nearly all of their income goes to childcare and rent. They budget, they try not to eat out too much, but they still feel it's impossible to have much left in terms of their savings. They also don't see themselves becoming homeowners in their lifetime. They're one of that 70% that have lost faith in the ability to do that. So there's an overwhelming sense from them about the hopelessness of it. I think of Sandra, who's in her 50s, and her husband, who's 60 and working full-time. Sandra has had to stop working recently because of rheumatoid arthritis and other health conditions. And both Sandra and her husband have never been able to save enough deposit to buy a home of their own. They've always lived in rentals and worried about how they will live as they age. Sandra said they would do anything to have a secure home to live in until they don't need it anymore. She said they don't care if the government had equity in the home. That's what she said to me. I'll take it. You know, if this is going to change what I've experienced over decades, I'll take that. And they were very grateful and appreciative of that change. So when we're talking about this, how can it be that when we are here in Australia, blessed as we are with prosperity and wealth, can we allow a scenario to develop in which a family with both parents in work, or two adults who both worked into their 50s, regarded as impossible to ever own a home? This has to change. This is fundamentally not acceptable, and that's why we're passing this bill in this place. And I would call on those who are seeking to oppose it or said that they were opposed it to think of those people who would actually make a difference to their lives. Think of the people who will actually have an enormous change to their life because of the impact that this legislation will have on them to allow them to get into that home ownership. The 40,000 Australians that it will change their lives for the better. Think about those people, because all of us come to this chamber, we have a purpose. We have a purpose to make the difference to people's lives, to make lives of Australians better. And I don't think it's too idealistic to say I want an Australia where housing is a fundamental human right. We start with helping people as much as we can to get into home ownership. This is what this bill is about. Rather than grandstanding and politicising the issue, rather than jumping up and down and trying to get the meme and the photo opportunity and all the rest of it, this is about a piece of legislation that will change 40,000 lives for the better and get them into home ownership. And Australia,
order. The member for
Australia
Wills has the call.
Where housing is affordable, where housing is accessible, where young people can buy a home. Inheritance can't be the only way Australians finally get to experience home ownership, Deputy Speaker. As I stated at the beginning of the speech, every so often we're presented with the policies that provide us with an opportunity to fundamentally address a problem in a way which will shape the future of the country. Now, we've passed a lot of bills in this place in the last year and a half on housing, whether it's the HAF, whether it's this Help to Buy scheme, whether it's all the other things that I've gone through in my remarks. And we've seen consistently opposition from the coalition and from the Greens political party. The HAF was one example, and they finally changed their mind on that. Every so often issues of such profound magnitude arise, and it's up to us to address them. It's up to us to make that difference. And this is one of them, Deputy Speaker. This bill is one of them, a moment that defines the future of the people in our nation and actually making a difference to their lives. So this government is taking serious action to do that, to make it easier for Australians to own their very own home. And I call on those who are saying they will oppose this to think again about the people that this will impact and the lives that will be made better because of this legislation. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for Wills. The